Marian here. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my top 10 Israeli/Jewish TV series and shows that you can binge right now. I have watched and absolutely love all of these. If you're interested in Jewish culture or Hebrew language film and TV, these shows are so good. Actually, the Israeli film industry is kind of known for making amazing shows that often will get adapted for American shows. Their most famous one is Homeland. So before it became Homeland here in the US, it had a different name, was a different series in Israel, but it was based on the same idea. Anyways, let's jump into my top 10 list. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Marian and I make videos about being a mom and being a Jewish mom, and I would love to have you as one of my subscribers. And if you want to follow along with my everyday life as a Jewish mom, then definitely follow me on Instagram. Okay, so I watch all of these shows in Hebrew. My Hebrew is... it's okay, beseder. I just like to watch it in the native language. I hate when they dub, but I read the subtitles. So that's just a little background. And there is one show on here, actually my second favorite one, that's not Israeli, but I included it because it was Jewish. Okay, let's jump in with my number one choice for Israeli film and TV, and that is Shtisel. Shtisel is so good. It is about a family living in Israel who are ultra religious, and they live in a very religious area of Israel, and it's all about their life, but it follows the extended family, starting with the patriarch, the father who's in his grandfather age, as well as his son and kids and their kids. And it was the original show that made Shira Haas, who stars in Unorthodox, famous. She plays a character called Ruchami in the show, and she's so good. It's amazing because she's like a relatively minor character, I would say in the show when it started out especially, but people just instantly loved her, and you can kind of tell that. But it follows this ultra religious family, and it follows the main character who, for one reason or another, doesn't fit in with the Orthodox community. He's an artist and he really wants to explore his passions in life, but he's kind of caught in the mix. His dad is the principal of a cheder, of like this ultra religious school, and he is unmarried, which is like unfathomable at his age. So he's trying to figure out how to respect his father, how to live within the community, but also pursue his art. And it sounds like dramatic, and it is dramatic, but it's just so relatable. And that's what's so good about the show, is it showcases a family that seems very unrelatable, like to my family or your family, but their struggles are so common, and it makes them so real. It really shines a light, not in a way of like the way Unorthodox does, of making a religious family seem like extreme or weird or different, but just absolutely like all of us. And it's just such a gripping show, and you're just cheering for him all the way, sort of. So it has 2 or 3 seasons now. I know they're just finished up filming a new one, and it just came out in Israel, and it should be out here soon as well. So I can't wait for that, but definitely binge the first ones and get caught up because Shtisel is so good. Okay, up for number 2 is my one that doesn't really qualify on this list, but I couldn't not mention it, and that is Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. It's not an Israeli show, but it does follow a Jewish family, and I feel like it showcases them in a really interesting way in terms of that time period, that type of Jewish culture where it's like sort of assimilated, but there's still a lot of strong cultural values there. There's a lot of complaints that Midge is not played by an actual Jewish person, or that some of the things she does, like a Jewish family wouldn't do. So I would say that I wouldn't watch it just to learn more about Jewish people, but there are so many funny Jewish references in it, and I just absolutely love the show. It's so funny. If you haven't seen it yet, you gotta go watch it right now. Okay, number 3, back to actual Israeli shows, and this one is Fauda. Fauda is also on its 3rd season. It stars the actor Lior Raz, who's so good, and basically it follows some hyper elite Israeli spies, or I don't want to say spies, but they're like top agents in the Israeli army, and they're constantly going into different territories or different foreign places around Israel to extract or do something crazy. And it's filmed in a way that like follows an exact time period, so it's not like it skips here and there very much. You like mostly feel like you're really living in the moment, and each of the series extends over maybe just a few days, but it's so intense, so gripping. I would say it's like the most highly bingeable Israeli TV show. Each season is better than the next. They're so intense, and it's an interesting look into Israeli culture. Even though it follows like a super elite branch, there's still a lot of Israeliness to it. I would say it doesn't give a perfect, like, overbroad impression of what's going on between the Israelis and Palestinian conflict and that kind of thing. So I would say if you don't understand those politics at all, or the geopolitical realities, it might be a little like, what's going on? What are these places? But it's so fascinating that even if you know nothing about it, it's totally gripping. Okay, next up is an amazing film called The Spy. This one stars, sorry, my dogs are walking in right now. Hi puppies. This one stars Sacha Baron Cohen, and it's based on the true story of an Israeli spy. These doggies. Of an Israeli spy named Eli Cohen, who infiltrates the Syrian government. And again, it's one of those super gripping spy movies. Also, because it's based on a true story, it's that much more interesting because you're like really think of the real impact that's going on here. And it also looks at the life of his wife, who's back home in Israel, as well as like what he gets up to as a spy as he like totally becomes this other person, and then what happens to him at the end. It is amazingly told. It's so interesting. If you're into that like 1970s style, not just for like the clothes and the aesthetics, but just like what was going on in the world at the time, it's totally fascinating. It's one of those things where both these countries have changed so much since then. It's just fascinating to kind of get a look back at what they were like then and how much was going on at that time. Okay, next up is another favorite of mine. This one where I was like, how could I be listing it only as number 5? It was so good. This one is called Tehran. This is another spy movie, again, about Israeli agents operating in Tehran. This so far is just on its first season. I think another one's coming out though. It was so good, like so intense, so gripping. Again, it takes place in that like minute by minute format where you feel like you're really living it in the moment. This one also had a lot of twists and turns and a lot of like not knowing who was good, who was bad, what was happening, trying to like guess and play along with the spies, which was amazing. I would say that's where it kind of differed to Fauda, where Fauda you could mostly tell like who was who and what their objectives were, and it was more like kind of like the shoot 'em up style spy movies where you just like were like watching them escape all the bullets and like being excited, versus Tehran was a little more like play along in the suspense. But it was really gripping, highly bingeable series, really fun one to watch, but totally like edge of your seat. Okay, coming in at number 6 is A Valley of Tears. I think I talked about this in a recent video. This one is about the Yom Kippur War in Israel. So again, it takes place in the 70s, and it follows the lives of a few different soldiers leading up and during this war. So this was a war where Israel was really caught off guard, and it follows the soldiers and them being caught off guard as well. It's very much a war movie, and it's a very depressing. I kept waiting for like things to turn around and the good things to happen, but it is based on true stories and true characters mostly, so it's really fascinating, again in the same way The Spy is, but it is really sad. But it does show like a lot of realities of war, especially because in the Israeli army, a lot of the soldiers are really young, really inexperienced, and at that time especially, there's this difference between like the young recruits who are out in the field versus the reserves and them coming up. So it tells a fascinating story. There's a lot of love stories, a lot of like human connection in it, and a lot of really interesting war drama if you're into things like tanks and like the machinery of war, especially at that time. Okay, continuing on with my war/spy movie. This is actually a little bit different. It's a different take on it, but it's called When Heroes Fly, and it's about ex-soldiers. So it's a team of like brothers who were together in a war in the army in Israel, but now they're done. Their life's kind of back to normal, but they're suffering from the repercussions of that. And one of their guys goes missing in South America. So the plot, it like bizarrely kind of caught me off guard, really takes place in South America trying to find their missing friend. But again, it's still sort of an Israeli war movie because it flashes back to their time together and how they have this amazing connection. And then it's like the gripping suspense of finding people who are lost in South America. South America is a really popular travel destination for Israelis, so there's a bit of that like cultural connection, cultural overlap, and the film takes place in the current time period, and it also showcases some of like current Israeli culture and things like that. So another really good one. It's a little more out there than the others. It gets a little trippy, and the plot is, I mean, as you've heard me describe, it's a little trippy to begin with, but really fascinating. I loved it. Highly bingeable. Okay, next up is kind of a divergent, although it is an Israeli war movie, but it's called Zero Motivation, and it's actually a comedy. So it focuses on a female soldier. This is the only one on my list that's a few years older, but I wanted to put it in because it's really good. It's really funny, but it's a dark comedy. So it's about this woman and some other women that she's with in the army, and there's a lot of living in the army that can be very boring. You know, you're just like stationed on a base and nothing's really happening. So it deals with that aspect of it, of like there's zero motivation and how they kind of waste their time being out in the desert, wherever they are, like in the middle of nowhere with nothing happening. But it's really funny, and it kind of showcases that dark Israeli humor. Another good one. Okay, and last on my list, I had to include it even though I didn't really love it, and that is Unorthodox. I have a whole review of Unorthodox. I'll link it below. It wasn't my favorite movie. I did think it was good. It was interesting. I get why it got all the praise that it got. I just didn't find it so real and relatable, even though it's based on a true story. The whole like story that when it goes into her life in Berlin. So in case you don't know, Unorthodox is about a woman played by Shira Haas, who's amazing, who escapes from her extremely religious family and a marriage that she wasn't happy in, and like runs off to Berlin to kind of escape, and then her husband comes to try and find her. So it's very fascinating in terms of the way it showcases the ultra-Orthodox lifestyle, although many people said that it's really an unfair portrayal. And it's an interesting story in terms of like one woman's journey, but I just, once she like left, when she's not in New York anymore, I just wasn't that interested in it anymore. So I would say everyone else likes it, so check it out. But I'm putting it last on my list, but it's still a good one. And that is it. I really only have 9, and that's because I didn't want to add a 10th that I didn't truly believe in. I mean, I even put Unorthodox in there, that you guys know is not my absolute favorite, but deserves to be in the top 10 list. But I'm ending at 9 because I don't want to lead you guys astray and mention the last one that I don't even really like that much. So that's my top 10, really top 9 list. Israeli film and TV is so good. If you've never watched any of it, prepare yourself for some really good stuff. Like I said, they're often an inspiration for American shows to be adapted from Israeli shows. It's kind of known as the spot where there's a lot of art and creativity, so it's really cool to see Israeli film and TV if you haven't yet, and they're all available on either Netflix or Amazon Prime. I will try and make a list in the description box that tells you where each one is with the title spelled out so you can look them up. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, hit that red subscribe button down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!